Hello and welcome. For those of you who are expecting to see Karen Reed or Aidan Kearney content, this video will not pertain to Karen Reed or Aidan Kearney or Sandra Birchmore. This video is about the healthcare system in the US, and it is also about United Healthcare's CEO, Brian Thompson, and the alleged suspect that is currently in custody for the killing of Brian Thompson. Now, my YouTube channel started because of the corruption in Massachusetts, the state I live in. I wanted to be another voice in the movement for Karen Reed's freedom and justice for John O'Keefe, as well as the other cases we learned about through the Karen Reed case, the Sandra Birchmore situation, the Enrique Delgado Garcia situation, Justin, and several others. So I live in Massachusetts, and I have provided commentary for the extensive and deeply interconnected corruption in Massachusetts. And in my opinion, much of this corruption is an extension of the rest of the US. And when we consider that a majority of us are ruled and controlled by corrupt institutions and corrupt organizations, and that Big Pharma itself is corrupt and ruled by greed, then it's only fair that we also discuss the corruption in Big Pharma and the corruption that has been unveiled through the death of Brian Thompson. So I will be playing this video, and as always, I am leaving a link in the description below if you would like to watch it without my commentary. And for those who don't like this information or don't like this content, you don't have to follow me. You don't have to be a subscriber. And I do not feel an apology is necessary from either side. I am here to provide commentary on government corruption and corporate corruption as a whole, because government and corporate corruption are interlinked. They are deeply interwoven, much like the MSP and the judicial system in Massachusetts is also corrupt and deeply interlinked and interwoven. Thank you for being here.
Seeming to praise the Unabomber. A Goodreads profile that appeared to belong to Luigi Mangione shows that earlier this year, Mangione reported having read the 1995 Anti-Technology Manifesto written by the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, the infamous domestic terrorist and mathematician known for sending deadly bombs through the mail between 1978 and 1995. Quote, "It's easy to quickly and thoughtlessly write this off as the manifesto of a lunatic in order to avoid facing some of the uncomfortable problems it identifies. But it's simply impossible to ignore how prescient many of his predictions about modern society turned out," Mangione wrote in a review of the book in January. Quote,
and I've watched documentaries about Ted Kaczynski, and I kind of just felt I have had this stance that it's tragic that Ted was so violent. As I have expressed in previous videos and on my channel, I do not believe in violence. I think that corruption is violence. So often in law enforcement and government, we see violence, and violence is how they enforce corruption. So I have had the stance that if we are truly wanting change and we are truly wanting a better world for ourselves and everyone else, then being violent like those in corrupt positions of power makes us no different than the corruption we rail against. So I will say again, I do not believe in violence. I do not consider violence as a solution ever. And Yet Ted Kaczynski was intelligent. He was smart. He was wise. He had a lot of compelling views about the system in which we all live. But unfortunately, he was violent. And for that, I turned away from whatever he had to say. I gave him the cold shoulder in a way. I don't care how intelligent you are. I don't care how correct you are about the corrupt system we all live in. If you resort to violence, you are not part of the solution, period.
He was a violent individual, rightfully imprisoned, who maimed innocent people. While these actions tend to be characterized as those of a crazy Luddite, however, they are more accurately seen as those of an extreme political revolutionary. In his review, he also wrote thoughts someone else had shared about the Unabomber in a Reddit thread online, quoting a commenter who had described Kaczynski's acts as, quote, war and revolution, saying that he, quote, had the balls to recognize that peaceful protest has gotten us absolutely nowhere and that violence never solved anything, is a statement uttered by cowards and predators. So,
and I get that angle. I get that point. Peaceful protest certainly hasn't gotten us very much in this country. And so often when we attempt to peacefully protest in the U.S., we have infiltrators sabotage the cause, and they commit acts of violence, and then the peaceful protest turns into a violent protest. And then the credibility of the cause goes out the window. I agree that peaceful protests haven't done much for people in this country. And it's true that when the government looks at the protesters, they certainly just shrug their shoulders and look the other way. And it's clear if we consider where all of our institutions are right now, the status of these organizations and institutions which run the country. A lot of them are operated and ruled by greed and social conditioning that they spread down to the rest of us. This country was founded on capitalism, and that capitalism has reached a level of excessiveness that has and continues to impact the working class and the poor more so than anyone else. But though I understand that peaceful protesting doesn't do much, and it has not done much, when we consider where everyone is at, that those in power are still corrupt, and they have more power than they've ever had before. And the corruption is so prevalent that, again, the working class and the poor feel it. They are suffering. However, I disagree that the violence never solved anything statement uttered by cowards and predators. Being violent is not a brave act. Being violent is a predator's action. It is what predators do. Being violent is not what people who are solution-oriented do. And you might be asking, well, how do we change the system if peaceful protests don't do anything? And I say, maybe the system is not meant to be changed. Maybe it's impossible to change it because those in power don't want it changed. And because they are in power and they have all the resources to remain in power for the next couple of centuries, maybe the aim should not be to change the system, but to create small societies within societies that help one another. They are going to continue this machine with or without us. So I say we have to look out for ourselves. We have to look out for our neighbors, for one another. There is the mainstream society that corporate and corruption rules. Corporate corruption rules alongside corporate and corrupt government. And then there are small societies within the mainstream society. Small societies of people who live and help themselves and each other, apart from the mainstream society. To me, that is the ultimate solution. Let the corrupt people in positions of power have their mainstream society. Let them pretend that everything is great in life, because they are the ones in power. They are the ones with the resources. Let them have it. But for the rest of us, maybe we should just take matters into our own hands and help one another out. I participate in outreach. I volunteer in outreach. And if you participate in outreach, you are part of the solution. There are people suffering because of the system we all live in. And you can be part of the solution by lessening that suffering.
Obviously, and Ted Kaczynski, has been a polarizing figure for a very long time. And there are a whole lot of people who think he's a hero. And whether you abhor what he did or think he's a hero, a lot of what he wrote in his manifesto about technology, and the environment, technology, and the dangers of technology have come true. I give you artificial intelligence and how United Healthcare is using artificial intelligence to deny upwards of 90% of healthcare claims. But the point of that, Mangione was quoting somebody else who said, has the balls to recognize that peaceful protest has gotten us absolutely nowhere, is pointing out a truth that people have exercised their democracy. People have protested for universal health care. People have protested against predatory for-profit health care. People have voted, and health care costs have gone up. The private health insurance industry has gotten more powerful. Pharmaceutical companies have gotten more powerful. So this is not me saying go out, get your guns and shoot down CEOs, but this killing of Brian Thompson and the just tsunami of outcry against the health insurance company are showing that a lot of people feel they have no choice but to take more extreme measures. In addition to that online post, previous posts from him on Reddit, allegedly written from him on Reddit, show his chronic back problem and give more insight into why he did what he did. Mangione, 26, appeared to operate a Reddit profile where he detailed health issues including back pain, brain fog, and sciatica. Several posts were made on a section of the site known as subreddit dedicated to the spinal condition spondylolisthesis.
I looked up what it meant and also the pronunciation.
Spondylolisthesis.
Spondylolisthesis. Such a long name. But according to this definition, it is a forward displacement of one of the lower lumbar vertebrae over the vertebra below it or on the sacrum. Okay, let's look at images. Okay, let's see this one. So the normal situation is on the left, and spondylolisthesis on the right. And it reads here, there is a fracture in lamina Benova process and inferior articular process are not behind sacrum. Nerve is compressed here. So that's a normal spine on the left, and this is a spine like that of Mangione. So we are talking about an extremely painful condition here. And I've known plenty of people with back problems. I am close to someone right now who has back problems. My son was born with a displaced vertebrae because he was delivered naturally. And thankfully, through the help of chiropractic over the years, it's now back in place. It's a normal spine. But if I never corrected it, or if I never knew, if I never sought a second opinion, because just so you guys know, this is my personal situation, my personal experience with Big Pharma. The hospital thought that my son had acid reflux because he was spitting up the milk. And when he would spit it up, he would cry because the stomach acid would come up with it, and it was eroding his neck. You know, like he could feel it. It was burning him, and so he would cry. You know, really broke my heart that my son was suffering while he was eating. You know, and I went to a naturopath, and she said, "You delivered him naturally. Like one of his vertebrae is slightly displaced. Just take him to a chiropractor." And it was a non-invasive procedure over years to get his spine back to normal. And it wasn't a regular hospital that told me that my son had a displaced vertebrae. It wasn't Big Pharma that told me that my son had a displaced vertebrae. It was a naturopath. And then a chiropractor corrected it without surgery. Okay, and I know someone else who's close to me who has back problems. My son, thankfully, no longer has back problems, but I know how low a quality of life can be when someone has severe back problems and there's no relief for it despite multiple surgeries and multiple treatments. There are people today in the US living with pain, severe pain every day, because the system isn't about health. It is about profit. Thankfully, I went to a naturopath and I was able to correct my son's spine naturally, without surgery and without medication. But Big Pharma always wants the easy button. They always want the surgery. They don't tell you about natural alternatives that actually work. Okay? So I'm saying this is my personal experience with Big Pharma. Had I not sought a second opinion, my son would be suffering today, and they may have wanted surgery for him in order to correct the vertebrae. Like, just this country does so much that is unnecessary to the human body. This country, the US, so often pushes for surgery because they profit the most from surgery. And they so often push for medication because they profit the most from medication. They want you to be dependent on the system. Big Pharma wants you to be dependent on Big Pharma. They don't want you to know that there are actually natural alternatives that could be far more successful and far less painful than what they so often recommend. This is something else I wanted to show you just to prove my point. I've known for years now, because I researched it myself, I have known for years that the US is not the healthiest country in the world, despite Big Pharma inundating us with big pharma procedures and so-called treatments. The U.S. has not been the healthiest country in the world ever, just so you know. So you might think we've got all of our shit together because of the big pharma infrastructure and the growing demand for healthcare positions. You might think, man, the U.S. is booming. We've got a system that takes care of its people. Just look at all this healthcare. Look at all this big pharma. But that is far from the truth. The U.S. never makes it to the top 10 healthiest countries. All right? And I'm going to show you the top 20 healthiest countries. And it's Singapore, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Israel, Norway, Iceland, Sweden, Switzerland, Netherlands, Luxembourg, Germany, Hong Kong, Finland, Italy, Denmark, Belgium, Malta, France, and Austria. Okay? 20 countries, guys, and the U.S. is not one of them. Just think long and hard about that. But you know what the U.S. is the top 10 of? A global health security index. That's right. The U.S. is not the healthiest country in the world, but you know what? The U.S. has big pharma. And what big pharma does is it provides prevention of the emergence or release of pathogens, according to this. But we know that's not true. Detection and reporting, early detection and reporting for epidemics of potential international concern. But again, we know that's not true. Rapid response to and mitigation of the spread of an epidemic. Again, we know that's not true. Health system, sufficient and robust health system to treat the sick and protect health workers. Again, we know that's not true. Compliance with international norms. Compliance with international norms puts you at the top 10 with the top 10 of the Global Health Security Index. Compliance with international norms, aka Big Pharma. Compliance with Big Pharma. All right. And look, the U.S. The U.S. is part of the top 10 healthiest countries in the world, referring to the Health Security Index. And right here, I'll read this part briefly. While the United States may not be the healthiest country in a general sense, national obesity is a particular area of concern, and in fact, the country's COVID-19 response has drawn criticism in many circles. The USA's massive capacity to research, communicate, and respond to a pandemic-level threat was enough to place it in the top spot. The United States ranked first in a wide range of indicators, including biosecurity, biosafety, epidemiology, workforce, capacity to test and approve new countermeasures, communication with healthcare workers, and more. What it really is that the U.S. ranks number one in big pharma. The U.S.'s allegiance and compliance with big pharma, which is not healthcare. It is health for profit. It is insurance for profit. It is treatment, so-called treatment for profit.
Pronouncing that correctly. Several details appear to link the profile of Mangione, and a 2016 post contained a link to a page on GitHub, a coding website. Let me read one part. One of Mangione's apparent posts on the R. spondylolisthesis subreddit, dated to February of 2024, referred to having had a surgery for the condition 6 months prior. So this would indicate he had surgery in 2023. Quote, yeah, I had an L5-S1 spinal fusion 6 months ago after 1.5 years of failed conservative treatment. Within 7 days of the fusion, I was on zero pain meds. That's probably faster than most folks, but my point is just that your body isn't supposed to be in pain and need meds. Even after getting my back sliced open and my spine drilled into, I wasn't in much pain. Several other posts advocated surgery for the condition to other users. One post claimed that as a nuclear option, readers seeking surgery could convince doctors of its necessity by faking a foot drop or deliberately urinating on themselves. In another post in August 2023, the user remarked how his spinal injury was once completely devastating and worried he was destined to chronic pain and a desk job for the rest of his life before considering surgery. I want to read you more of his alleged Reddit posts, because within them, there seems to be indication that he, at least for either a short or long period of time, was denied surgery. Published under the username Mr_Cactus, Mangione's alleged post shed additional light on his mindset in the months leading up to the killing of Brian Thompson. Quote, when my speaking of spondylolisthesis, went bad on me last year, it was completely devastating as a young athletic person, Mr. Cactus wrote in a subreddit for spondylolisthesis, a condition where the vertebrae in the spine slip out of place. Seemingly, all I could read on the internet was that I was destined to chronic pain and a desk job for the rest of my life. They added that the thought completely destroyed them until learning about the prospect of spinal fusion surgery, which connects two or more bones in the spine, preventing movement between them that can cause some type of back pain. And I have a little experience with this myself. I'll share in a minute. The 26-year-old suspect's alleged account was surfaced yesterday by a handful of Reddit users who claim to have recognized Mangione from his posts and comments in R spondylolisthesis. Quote, I feel like I've seen his username in my notifications before. This is crazy, one user remarked. In April this year, Mr. Cactus had shared advice with the community. Keep trying different surgeons. Nobody will operate on my back until I'm at least 40 is nonsense coming from a medical professional who lacks perspective. That's interesting. Of course, speculation. We don't know specifically. I'm sure we will find out what his personal timeline and experiences were. But it seems by the writing of this Reddit, which allegedly was him, it seems that either he had, tried different doctors to get approval for spinal surgery, which is fusing your vertebrae together, and was told you're too young. He was 25 or 26 at the time that he might have been denied by more than one doctor, or he knows that has happened with other people. This actually did happen with me. As I told you yesterday, I had a severe back issue, short term, where my L5 disc, we'll show you on the screen now, my MRI, my L5 disc, which is at the bottom there. So you see the healthy discs, and then that disc at the bottom where the end of it is bulging onto my S1 sciatic nerve. It was bulging and herniated for so long, a piece of my disc had actually broke off and was stuck in my spinal cavity. So it led to severe muscle spasms down my leg. My hamstring, my calf had severe spasms. I had total numbness in my left foot. I got emergency surgery to get that disc, the piece of disc that broke off, out of my spinal cavity. Then I did physical therapy for a year, but still I had issues. So I did a cleanup surgery the next year. And then about 2 years later, I wasn't in severe pain anymore, but still tightness, stiffness. So I got an MRI and it showed, as you could see on the screen, that my L5 disc is very, very narrow, very narrow. There's barely any space or disc left in there. So I have tightness, because when you have that small of a space of a disc, it squeezes on your lower back, which causes tightness in your hamstrings, calves. I still have a little numbness in my left foot, my left toe specifically. And I said to the doctor, would spinal fusion help this? But I was older than him. I was in my mid-30s at the time that I spoke to the doctor. The doctor said, try to hold off as long as you can for spinal fusion, because that's fusing, that would fuse my L4 and L5 together, basically, L4, L5 discs. But it only really lasts for like 15 to 20 years. So the younger you get it, you would just have it would only really last the actual benefits of it for 15 to 20 years. That's why they, unless you absolutely need it, tell you to wait as long as you can. So the doctors that might have been denying him, telling him you're too young, probably for that reason, because it only lasts for about 15 to 20 years. I don't know his specific case. I don't know how many doctors he went to, or, how bad his situation was. I'm sure we will find all those things out. But he also allegedly wrote that in the Reddit that if you're in this situation, you should tell doctors Tell them you are unable to work, do your job, they added. We live in a capitalist society. I've found that the medical industry responds to these keywords far more urgently than you describing unbearable pain and how it's impacting your quality of life.
I get, if these are truly Mangione's words, I get where he's coming from. We do, in fact, live in a capitalistic society. And what Mangione is saying, again, if these are truly his words, he is saying you need to speak their language. When you're communicating with Big Pharma, you need to speak Big Pharma's language. Tell them your money is being threatened. Tell them you can't work. And they will respond in kind, more likely. It's not a guarantee. But it's like, you wouldn't like it if your money was being threatened, would you, Big Pharma? My money is being threatened, Big Pharma. I need help. I get it. I get where he's coming from.
Plan Z, fake a foot drop or piss yourself, they continued. This is the nuclear option, but there comes a time when it's just ridiculous that people won't operate on your broken spine. And by the way, this is, and should tell you, Reddit took this account down, and a spokesperson said we typically take accounts down if they're linked or allegedly linked to, a serious crime like murder. But I should tell you, I mean, under the video I did yesterday, I knew back pain is common in America. I mean, the comments under my video yesterday, which exploded, by the way, hundreds of thousands of views.
It's especially common if you are part of the working class. It's especially common if you work for a living or if you're an athlete. It's especially common if you use your body in a way that maybe it's not designed to be used, like working 50 hours a week, 60 hours a week, or being an athlete. So often, athletes, as healthy as they are, often have joint and bone issues because they are overusing their bodies. I'm not like throwing shade at athletes, and I'm not saying being athletic is a bad thing. I think we should all strive to be healthy. We should all strive to be physically optimum as much as possible. We should not go along with the trends of Western countries, which is by and large obesity. We should be physically healthy as much as possible for a better quality of life. However, so often athletes ask any runner in particular, if they have good joints, if they have good genes, or how is their back doing? Talk to some football players. How are their bones? Have they ever broken any bones? I'm just saying, being an athlete means you are overusing your body. And being in the working class also means you are overusing your body. People need healthcare in this country. They need to mend their wounds and their injuries. But look at what is happening. Look at what has happened. Look at what Big Pharma is. It's not for the people. It's for profit.
I mean, it is just a flood of people talking about their chronic back pain, from young people to older people. So this is a serious issue, and it's not just the physical aspect. It is the mental aspect as well. I want to show you here. The suspect appeared to be driven by anger against the health insurance industry and against corporate greed as a whole, according to an NYPD intelligence report obtained by CNN Tuesday. Quote, he appeared to view these targeted killings of the company's highest-ranking representative as a symbolic takedown and a direct challenge to its alleged corruption and power games, asserting in his note that he is the first to face it with brutal honesty. You think? What an assessment. Yes. A symbolic takedown indeed. Whether you agree with it or not, and I've said from the beginning, I'm not telling you to go get your guns and shoot down CEOs, but there's a reason there is an outpouring of affection for this man and support for this man, and now, a flood of offers to pay for his legal bills. There is a reason. Places like the New York Times just suddenly deciding to report on this. Reaction to CEO killings exposes frustrations with the health system. Again, total minimization. It's not frustrations with the health system. It's disgust, anger, fury. Get rid of it. In some quarters, the suspect in Brian Thompson's murder is being defended and even applauded by Americans who share his outrage over the insurance industry. I'm not reading this whole thing, but I'll show you a little. The killing of the United Healthcare chief executive Brian Thompson has mesmerized a deeply polarized nation that shares a collective frustration over dealings with health insurance companies. On social media, some people have cheered, it's more than some, for the gunman and expressed little remorse over the death of Mr. Thompson. That adulation reflects public anger over healthcare, said Nisakan Akpan, managing editor of Think Global Health. Quote, the UHC killing and social media response stem from people feeling helpless over health coverage and income inequality, he said. The topic is so often ignored by American public officials, he said, that voters have stopped listing it as a top priority. It's also ignored by the New York Times. It's also ignored by the Washington Post. And when it's not ignored and covered, it's lied about by them. They, along with CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, and all the rest, pushed out nonstop propaganda when, for the first time in forever, we actually had a candidate fiercely and aggressively calling for universal health care. They pushed out lies and propaganda about his position, what universal health care is, who would be administering it. The government would not be administering it, despite the New York Times and others' lies. I also want to show you a clip from another out-of-touch elitist, Chris Cuomo on News Nation.
Before he plays it, I just want to say, yes, these mainstream news networks are out of touch. They prevail under the guise of being against the evil politicians or the evil things, propaganda that they talk about on their networks, on their platforms, like racism, like racism is an issue in the US, but they talk about it like it's the only issue. They think racism is more prevalent than poverty. They think racism impacts people in the US more than capitalistic greed, more than corporate greed, more than big pharma greed. New York Times, MSNBC, all of them, they pretend to care about real people problems, real life problems that the average US American has to deal with on the daily. But what they really are about, New York Times, MSNBC, CNN, what they are really about is defending capitalism. Just pay attention long enough and you will notice that they defend the upper classes, the elite, and capitalism. They focus in on issues like racism to pretend that they care about issues among us commoners in the US. They focus on racism and sometimes income inequality, sometimes, but mostly they focus on racism. They don't focus on what people are really dealing with here in the US as the working class and people in poverty, which has nothing to do with race. Just so you know, the working class encompasses all races. Poverty encompasses all races. The real epidemic in the US is not racism. It's poverty. It's income inequality. It's that a majority of people in the working class are not getting paid enough for their bare basics in life. They can't afford food. They can't afford clothing. They can't afford shelter. Okay? That's the New York Times job. That's CNN's job. That's MSNBC's job. That's also Fox News' job. All of those corporate news networks, mainstream news networks, and even NPR, all of them are there to distract us from the real problems, from true progress. There has been no progress despite all of those mainstream media news networks. You will notice there is zero progress in this country when it comes to the quality of life for the working class and the poor.
Who wants to lecture you, the American people, and do some weird reverse psychology thing about how you, the American people, are, faking yourself as victims. Buckle up, because this was beyond the pale. Chris Cuomo yesterday reacting to Luigi Mangione's outburst on his way into an extradition hearing.
And it's completely out of touch and insults the intelligence of the American people.
Would have been nice if they wrote what he said. He was screaming about the injustice of our healthcare pricing and how it is offensive to people's lived experience. And what he didn't say is that he's innocent. And forget the fact that when he sees the cameras, he's like a tiger, but he was a pussy cat when it was just him and the officers. The message he hissed should be heard. Healthcare is so expensive, so easily denied, that it offends people's lived experience with oppressive health insurance. But how would he know? He had a bad back and a surgery, but there's no reason to believe he was left broke or broken by a horror story with an insurance company. His lived experience was making money off healthcare. His family owned nursing homes that made them rich. 7-figure donations to hospitals, paid for him to go to the Ivy League, to live in Hawaii, to create his best life. My point is not to diminish the outrage about healthcare, or even to diminish him, but to...
Cuomo says that his point is not to diminish the outrage, while he is literally diminishing the outrage. And he has no room to talk. He and his brother, who are some of the most corrupt individuals on mainstream media. Cuomo, anybody Cuomo on mainstream media has no room to talk about corruption or about money. Okay, Chris Cuomo is a millionaire as well. And hello, he was on CNN for the longest time talking out of his ass. And now he's here still talking out of his ass. Like, why does he still have a platform?
Source where what we're seeing with him comes from. You see, this guy is part of a problem that is harder to fix than healthcare or any corporate issue. He is proof of a new fundamentalism, appropriated oppression. In this case, the anger of those who get done dirty by big health insurers. And he's not alone.
This is Cuomo downplaying and undermining what Mangione really meant in his arguments. Chris Cuomo is talking about appropriated things while he himself is appropriated as a mainstream media anchor. Everything he says is an illusion. He is an actor. He is a puppet. He pretends to give a damn about the things he talks about. All he's doing, people, is earning a paycheck. He is making himself a multimillionaire day after day. That's all Chris is really about. Anything that comes out of his ass, out of his mouth, is for the betterment of himself. He doesn't give a damn about you or me or even this guy who killed Brian Thompson. He doesn't give a damn about the entire situation. And that is clear in how he undermines the facts of what happened. He is twisting it so that there is a new narrative as to what the issues in the U.S. really are.
He reminds me of white kids I've seen turning protests about police using excessive force into riots, or more.
You see how he uses the race? He brings race into it, Cuomo. He brings race into it. Why?
Recently, like the kids on campus wearing the Hamas headgear. There is a new wave of people right here who have decided the best way to address perceived injustice.
You see what Chris is doing? Hamas headgear? It's not Hamas headgear. Chris doesn't know his facts. And again, what is he doing? He's doing what New York Times does, what CNN does, what MSNBC does, what Fox News does, what all the mainstream media news networks do. He is protecting and defending capitalism. He is protecting and defending psychopathy. He's protecting and defending corruption. Because these people in this image want to go out on the streets and protest against genocide, which the U.S. funds every single day. Chris Cuomo feels like he has a voice here. He has room to speak and to undermine the cause.
To pretend to inhabit the victim role as if they live it, which they don't. The problem with that is the pretend leads them to all.
It's like because you're not in Palestine, because you're not in Gaza, you shouldn't go out and protest against the genocide of Palestinians, when in fact your government is funding the genocide of Palestinians. Like, Chris Cuomo needs to shut up. If people want to go out on the street and protest, that is their right. And if they want to say, hey, we don't want our tax dollars going toward genocide, that is their right. We are all being victimized by the way in which our tax dollars are spent without our consent.
Often to the extreme.
I don't even know where to start. And this is not the only person talking this nonsense. First of all, Chris Cuomo, I was wrong the other day. His net worth is actually $16 million. $16 million. So this is who is lecturing us, you, the American people, on, I guess, fake victimhood.
Yeah, like that Chris Cuomo would group the Brian Thompson alleged shooter, again, Mangione, where they're saying it's him. We don't know yet. He is innocent until he's proven guilty. But Chris Cuomo just grouped a killer of a CEO with people protesting against the genocide of Palestine. Chris Cuomo grouped a CEO murderer with people walking on the street protesting against genocide. Again, that's legacy media. That's corporate mainstream media. Their job is to protect and defend capitalism, greed, and psychopathy. And they take these causes, they take these movements, and they rewrite history with their fake narratives, how they undermine one cause after another, after another, after another. They don't want people angry at capitalism. They don't want you or I angry at the greed of all of these institutions. Mainstream media is not there for you or I. It's there for the system. It's there for big pharma. It's there for government and corporate corruption. Mainstream media is there for itself and for the money machine that it benefits from. It doesn't give a damn about you or I.
And reverse victimhood. Headline, CNN paid Chris Cuomo millions before he was fired. What is his net worth? Easy breezy. Estimated 16 million. So this is the guy we should be listening to on victimhood, right? But there's something important in here and what he's saying. First of all, it doesn't matter. First of all, when he says Luigi Mangione and Americans are expressing fury at healthcare pricing, that's not what they're expressing fury at. This is not about healthcare pricing. This is about a corrupt system. This is about hell care. This isn't a healthcare system. And it's not about pricing. This isn't, I went to the restaurant and boy, that salad was really too expensive for what I got. This is about a healthcare system that is killing people. People don't just think the rent is too damn high. They think the system is corrupt. They think we live in a healthcare Hunger Games, which Chris Cuomo and his family have never had to suffer from. Because if they get denied, they have the money. Trust me. to pay for whatever treatment they need, whatever medication they need.
I will leave the link in the description below. Again, thank you for being here, and I will continue to provide content pertaining to corruption that is outside of Massachusetts, but still impacts Massachusetts. We are all impacted by Big Pharma's corruption, their excessive greed, their for-profit system that puts profit before people. Thank you for watching.